I remember back during the great anime binge of 2012. Elfen Lied was one of the very first horror anime I ever saw. I knew about how infamous it was for being one of the most violent anime out there. But I didn't let that stop me. I just finished school days. Nothing could be as shocking as that. In my experience, I find sometimes when you don't watch a show for a long time, you start to think that maybe it wasn't so great after all. Until you rewatch it and remember how good it was the last time you saw it. And boy does Elfen Lied have a lot to show, such as religious imagery, nudity, and bloods. Just as a brief overview, Elfen Lied is about a world where humans are killed without mercy by beings called the Diclonius, that are born to kill and infect humanity to repopulate the world with their race. Lucy, the Queen Diclonius, manages to escape from the research facility that has imprisoned her. She washes up on a beach leading her to meet Coda, a college student with a mysterious past, and who has one of the most memorable first lines in anime history.
What? Well...
Thinking about the story of Elfen Lied, there aren't a lot of shows like it. The theme of humans are all monsters isn't anything new and has been done in films like Elephant Man, but the idea of beings like the Diclonius are unique to Elfen Lied. Mamoru Kanbei, the director, describes Elfen Lied as a love story, and I'm inclined to agree, because it's not about the history of how the Diclonius came to be, or where they came from. It's about the characters and their individual journey in this bleak and oppressive world. You can tell with certain episodes that they were restricted by time constraints from the animation, where characters just freeze in place for a fraction too long, or added unnecessary padding to fit the runtime of the episode. Bando's final fight with Lucy was also completely glossed over, and just showed us the end of the scene. Slightly off topic, but does anyone remember when cousin-on-cousin romance was a common thing in anime? Unlike now where it's just full-on brother-sister bushwhacking. As a rare occurrence, the episode previews I would recommend watching instead of skipping them to avoid spoilers. The summaries they give are well written and are just cryptic enough as to not give away too much of the events that are to come. The show has quite a large cast of characters that really stand out and are enjoyable to watch. Coda's actions and reactions are fascinating because you don't really know much about him and he's hard to figure out on your first viewing. He doesn't act like a normal person would, which contrasts well with his fairly generic appearance. The multiple side characters each have their own little arcs that get resolved over the course of the show. And like any good horror, their stories are quite twisted and, for lack of a better term, completely fucked. Despite how dark the show is with its subject matter and themes, it has the odd joke that catches me off guard and gives me a genuinely hearty laugh, which I didn't think would be possible for this show. Certain character interactions like Nana and Bando are especially hilarious, even with how little they interact with each other. Moving on to the voice acting portion of the review, yes, the dub is campy at times, but like a good old ADV fashion, it takes about 4 episodes for the actors to get comfortable in their roles, which ends up with a surprisingly fun and entertaining performance.
Never sneak up behind me, stupid bitch. He's perfect.
I'm especially fond of Coda's dub voice, played by Adam Conlon, where the awkward way he talks fits the character well. You get the feeling that there's something deeply wrong with Coda, where he can be quite emotional at times, and then just pop back to his usual calm demeanor. Lucy also deserves a mention with her portrayal played by Kira Vincent Davis, from where she pulls off the childlike behavior of New and the brooding emotionless voice of Lucy. Although, like a lot of dubs, it breaks your suspension of disbelief depending on how much you're willing to believe a 12-year-old can sound like this.
You're a liar.
If you've watched my previous videos, you know that I'm a lot more forgiving with older dubs, more so than newer dubs. So this time around it's less of, just watch it in sub and save yourself the pain, and more, feel free to watch it in either version. Although the unreleased OVA changed Lucy's voice actress.
I'll keep you company. Who are you? I am your sister, Rosy Maiden Doll number 7, Kirakisho.
So if you intend to watch it, just stick to sub. I've heard the soundtrack of Elfen Lied described as only having one song, that song being Lilium, which is by far the most memorable song in the show, and while the other tracks are quite nice to listen to, in isolation they are quite forgettable, and even now I struggle to remember how they went without being reminded. There were some changes from the manga that are different in the anime, mostly because the manga hadn't finished yet while the show was airing. I have yet to read Elfenlied's manga, but I'd hoped it's happier than the anime. It's not, is it? I will say though that the very last scene in the show still gives me goosebumps to this day, and is still one of my favourite anime endings of all time. Out of all the anime I've seen, I hope one day Elfenlied gets a proper remake with improved animation, a more fleshed out story, and fix some of the continuity errors from the original. I wouldn't even mind if the anime ending was the same, the only consequence being that the dub won't be anywhere near the quality of the original, even as campy as it was. And knowing Funimation, Sentai Filmworks, or Bane Zoom, they'll probably try to insert some stupid localization change. Like how the researchers treat the Diclonius as misogynistic or some stupid shit like that. Actually, thinking about it, they'd most likely water down the blood and censor the nudity. At least until they release the Blu-ray a year later. Yeah, maybe it's best if it gets left alone after all. Bringing this review to a close, Elfenlied is an anime classic that has inspired the creativity of others, and will be remembered throughout the ages as having one of the most violent opening scenes in an anime series. After rewatching Elfenlied all these years later, I'm happy that it was still as good as I remembered it. I highly recommend checking it out if you're a fan of over-the-top gory anime, and if you're the kind of person to buy physical media, surprisingly you're in luck. For us in Australia, you can still buy physical copies of Elfenlied, a full 15 years after it was released. Even Spice and Wolf, which came out for us in 2011, went out of print before Elfenlied did. It really does go to show how popular Elfenlied was. And with that, that's all I have for you today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you all when I see ya. Having lost both the reason and meaning to continue, the man tries to escape it all. Each encounter is rendered meaningless, except for the pain it causes, and the stain of cringe and memes are too dense to wash away. Until the man declares to the world his decision. On the next Great Anime Reviewer, Episode 9, Amagami.